Hello! Welcome to English for Shared. Here, you learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's go!
The miracles of Jesus when heaven touched earth. Have you ever imagined seeing someone heal a blind man with a touch? Or turn water into wine with a simple command? Jesus's miracles were not just extraordinary events. They were living signs that God was among us. Each miracle told a story, carried a purpose, and left a mark on people's hearts. In this text, we will walk together through some of Jesus's best-known miracles, understanding what they mean and why they continue to touch millions of hearts to this day. Jesus turns water into wine. The wedding celebration in Cana of Galilee was in full swing. People were dancing, laughing, and celebrating. The bride and groom were radiant, and everything seemed perfect. Until a delicate problem arose. The wine was gone. For the guests, this simply meant the end of the drinks. But for the bride and groom, it was a public embarrassment. In the culture of the time, this was almost a dishonor. Mary, Jesus's mother, noticed the situation and with sensitivity went to Jesus. She didn't ask for anything directly. She simply said, "They have no more wine." It was a short speech, but filled with faith. She knew that if anyone could change this situation, it was he. Jesus responded enigmatically, "My hour has not yet come." Even so, Mary looked at the servants and said firmly, "Do whatever he tells you." It was as if to say, "I trust him completely." Jesus then ordered 6 stone jars to be filled with water. Each held about 100 liters. The servants obeyed, perhaps without understanding why. When the jars were full, Jesus told them to draw some of the water and take it to the master of ceremonies. They did so. And, upon tasting the contents, the master was astonished. It was wine, and the best wine at the party. The master didn't know what had happened, but he praised the bride and groom. Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior, but you have saved the best until now. The miracle was not announced with fanfare. Most didn't even know that something supernatural had happened. But for those who witnessed it, Mary, the servants, and the disciples, it was something deep and unforgettable. This first miracle of Jesus teaches us something precious. He transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. He cares about the little crises of our daily lives. Even when it seems late, even when everything seems lost, he can change history with a simple gesture. And what he does is always better than what we had before. 2. Jesus heals the sick. Wherever Jesus went, crowds gathered, not just out of curiosity, but because real need. People came with pain, illness, and physical and emotional wounds. Many of these illnesses were incurable in the medicine of the time. Lepers were expelled from society. The blind lived on alms. The paralyzed were forgotten on street corners. But Jesus did not ignore them. On the contrary, he saw them, approached them, and touched them. One of the most memorable moments was when a leper knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Lepers were considered unclean. No one dared approach them. But Jesus reached out, touched the man, and said tenderly, "I do. Be purified." At that very moment, the leprosy disappeared. That deformed skin was restored. But more than that man recovered his dignity, his social life, his place in the world. Another moving scene was the healing of blind Bartimaeus. He was sitting by the roadside, hearing Jesus passing by. He cried out at the top of his voice, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many told him to be quiet, but he cried out even louder. Jesus then stopped. This is beautiful. In the midst of the crowd and the rush, he stopped because of a blind and insistent man. He called Bartimaeus and asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" He replied, "I want to see." And Jesus said, "Go, your faith has healed you." There is also the story of the paralytic lowered through the roof. 4 desperate friends carried the man to where Jesus was. Since the house was full, they opened the roof and lowered it with ropes right in front of Jesus. What happened there was more than a physical healing. It was a healing of the soul. Jesus, seeing their faith, forgave the paralytic's sins and told him to get up and walk. And he got up on time, in front of everyone. These miracles reveal a Jesus sensitive, approachable, and deeply loving. He didn't just heal the body, he healed the whole being. And more, he never rejected anyone who approached with faith, no matter how small. His healings were responses to faith, but also to pain. He did not ignore human suffering. And this shows us that even today, we can take our pains to him because he continues to hear, see, feel, and heal. 3. Jesus calms the storm. It was night, and Jesus and his disciples were crossing the Sea of Galilee in a boat. It had been an intense day. Crowds had followed him. He had taught, healed, and touched many lives. Exhausted, Jesus lay down in the back of the boat and fell asleep. But suddenly, the sky darkened, the wind blew violently, and a scary storm fell into the sea. Giant waves crashed against the boat, water flooded the deck, and the disciples, many of them experienced fishermen, were left dominated by fear. They tried to empty the boat, to hold it against the wind, but it was useless. It seemed they were going to die. In the midst of the chaos, they looked back and saw Jesus, still sleeping. With desperate voices, they woke him. "Master, don't you care that we're dying?" It was more than a cry for help. It was a cry from the depths of his soul. And then Jesus stood up. With complete calm, he stood, looked out at the raging sea, and rebuked the wind and the waves, saying, "Silence, calm down." At that very moment, the wind ceased. The sea became calm. The silence was so profound it seemed supernatural. The disciples, still panting and wet, were now in awe. They stared at Jesus, unable to say a word. Fear gave way to amazement. "Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" they murmured among themselves. It was as if, for an instant, heaven had touched earth. They had seen many miracles, but never anything so direct, so impressive, so powerful. This miracle teaches us something that goes far beyond control over nature. It shows that even when the storms of life seem out of control, Jesus is present on the boat. And even if he seems silent, he is never absent. When we call on him sincerely, he rises and calms the chaos. He doesn't always prevent the storm, but he always offers peace in the midst of it. Because true security is not in the absence of the wind, but in the presence of Jesus. 4. Jesus multiplies the loaves and fishes. Jesus was surrounded by a crowd. Thousands of people followed him everywhere, eager to hear his words and see his miracles. Men, women, children, everyone was there because they felt something different in his presence. The day passed. The sun was already beginning to set. And then a problem arose. Nobody had enough food. The disciples suggested sending the people away so they could buy food in the nearby villages. But Jesus had another plan, one of compassion and miracle. It was then that a boy appeared with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. A simple snack, too small for so many people. The disciples doubted. "What is this for so many people?" they asked. But Jesus saw in that humble gesture enough to accomplish something great. He asked everyone to sit down on the grass. Then he took the loaves and the fish, looked up to the sky, gave thanks, and blessed the food. What happened next was simply unbelievable. As the disciples distributed the food, it didn't end. Every basket returned full. Each person received enough and more. The faces of the crowd, previously preoccupied with hunger, filled with surprise and joy. Everyone ate until they were satisfied, and in the end, there were still some left over. 12 baskets full of broken pieces. From little, Jesus made overflow. From the least, he created abundance. It was more than food. It was a living lesson in generosity, faith, and trust. This miracle teaches something profound. The little we have can become a lot in God's hands. Sometimes we feel like we're not good enough, that we don't have enough resources, or that our contribution is too small. But Jesus doesn't look at the size of the bread. He looks at the size of the heart. And when we give him what we have, even if it seems insignificant, he makes wonders happen. The multiplication of the loaves and fishes is more than a story about food. It is an eternal message about provision, delivery, and trust. Jesus takes care of every detail. He doesn't just feed bodies, he feeds souls. And when he is present, no one leaves hungry, whether physically or spiritually. The miracle lives on every time someone chooses to share what they little have with faith and love. 5. Jesus raises Lazarus. Lazarus, Martha, and Mary were more than just followers. They were close friends of Jesus. He frequently visited their home in Bethany, where he found rest, affection, and fellowship. It was in this environment of friendship and trust that grief arose. Lazarus became seriously ill. The sisters sent a message to Jesus saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick." They didn't ask for healing directly, but they trusted Jesus to know what to do. However, instead of leaving immediately, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. This seemed strange, but there was a greater purpose, something no one there could understand at the time. When Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, he found a scene of mourning. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Martha ran to meet him and, heartbroken, said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Even in the midst of pain, she kept the faith. "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask for." Jesus answered, "Your brother will rise again." Martha thought he was talking about the resurrection at the end of time. But then Jesus made one of the most powerful statements in the Bible. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Then Mary came weeping, and when Jesus saw her, he also wept. Yes, the Son of God cried. He knew he would raise Lazarus, but he still felt the pain of loss, the sadness of separation, the suffering of the people he loved. This shows that Jesus is not indifferent to our pain. He doesn't just solve our problems, he feels what we feel. Arriving at the tomb, he asked that the stone be removed. Martha hesitated. "Sir, it already smells bad." But Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And then, before everyone, Jesus raised his eyes to heaven, prayed to the Father, and in a loud voice cried out, "Lazarus, come out!" A deep silence fell. Everyone held their breath. And suddenly, Lazarus came out of the tomb, still with the linen cloths wrapped around his body, but alive, restored. The impossible had happened. This miracle was not just a victory over death. It was a living proof that when all seems lost, Jesus can still act. He not only has the power to heal, he has the power to resurrect what was once considered dead, including within us. Jesus' miracles were not just displays of power. They were expressions of God's love. Each miracle touched a heart, healed a pain, and brought hope. And, more than that, they reminded us that the impossible does not exist for God. Today, even if we don't see water turning into wine or the dead being resurrected before our eyes, miracles keep happening. In every life restored, in every prayer answered, in every person who finds peace where there was only pain. Just believe, just trust, because Jesus remains the same yesterday, today, and forever.